good, are we? I'm a minute late. Let me mic so that folks will be able to hear us. Good morning, folks. There we go. Yeah, this looks like church. Thank you guys for coming. Yeah, I'm glad this is sparking some interest for folks. Hope that we can share some answers, maybe raise a few more questions as well. The way we're going to do this, I'm going to start today by asking if you have questions, and we're going to deal with some of the questions that you have. And then we're going to turn to our, it's called the Jeremiah team, which is the team that the bishop put together to help us deal with the transition of disaffiliation. And this is a question and answer time with the Jeremiah team. So they're going to answer some of the questions that I'm sure you guys are going to have, but you'll get to hear from somebody different than me. And the question and answer time is about an hour and a half. Some questions will not be relevant for us, but it might be some good information for us to have when someone else asks those questions whom it might relate to. So we'll go to that question and answer time after we finish our time of questions this morning. So let's begin there. So I'm sure that somewhere along the line, someone has asked you a question. What is this thing about disaffiliation? Is our church going to leave? Can we leave? Is it going to cost us? And there's probably all kinds of other questions that you've probably heard or maybe thought of yourself. So what questions do you have? And if you would, wait for the microphone, because once again, as we're live streaming, folks will not be able to hear us. So we need to be mic'd. And Wendy.
I have two financial questions. Is it true that as it stands at the moment, according to the General Conference Protocol of 2019, if a church votes to leave the denomination, they get to keep their property but have to pay unfunded pension liability for 2 years appointments, which could be funded by the mortgage of the property?
Okay, I think, Wendy,
that's financial, not process, just the financial.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of questions in there that we can clarify. So let's go first to the protocol. In our question and answer time with the conference, this will be dealt with as well. Tom Berlin will answer this question about the protocol. So the protocol came out of the 2019 General Conference. Remember, the 2019 General Conference was called to deal with this issue of human sexuality in the church. It was a called General Conference. And so after that General Conference made the decision that the church would remain as is in its traditional thinking, in its traditional veins, and they strengthened that language of being traditional, okay? Right after that, the more progressive and liberal side of the church, they were not happy with that. So they protested and said, we're not going to abide by this. And so the protocol came about by that group, along with, because the traditionalist group also could see the possibilities of the future. So they got together and they put this protocol together. It's 10 pages, each one signed. There are signatures. I printed the document. It's this document, the protocol, and it has the outline as to what the protocol is. And the protocol was making provisions for those churches wishing to leave. And in that protocol was the financial side, which said, we will let the churches leave gracefully with their property. Okay? That protocol was a document that would have been sent to the 2020 General Conference, which was the very next year. As we know, that General Conference did not happen, right? Because of COVID. And we've not had a General Conference since. The next General Conference is 2024. So a lot has taken place over those couple of years. And the big thing that has taken place, and Tom Berlin will explain this a little bit better too, the protocol is pretty much off the table. A lot of the folks who put together that protocol, they have pulled out, that support has pulled out, so that protocol is probably not going to make it. Now, the key there is the 24 General Conference, which is a jurisdictional conference, and our Supreme Court, if you will, of the church, has to rule whether or not the 2024 is going to be a postponed conference, General Conference, or a new General Conference. If it is a postponed General Conference, they pick up everything from 2020, which means the protocol is still in the 2020 General Conference. They will need to work on that. They'll most likely throw it out, but there may be some things that they will work on within that for whatever the future is going to be. If it is a new General Conference, not postponed, then everything from 2020 is gone. They can resubmit all of that, but that will be gone. So the financial side of that is, yes, there are financial responsibilities that will have to take place. The 2 years of apportionments, I'm not sure, because each annual conference is doing this differently. So they're following a paragraph from the Book of Discipline, which the Judicial Council said you can use, and they're following this paragraph from the Book of Discipline, which allows disaffiliation, and each annual conference is making their own adjustments to that. So some annual conferences are saying you have to pay 2 years of apportionments plus all of your promised apportionments, if you will, those things that we promised to pay, obligations that local churches have to the denomination. Example of that is the retirement prior 1982 retirement. So prior to 1982, clergy did not have a retirement program. So 1983, the General Conference said, we need to take care of this. And all the churches agreed that we would fund all the pastors prior to 1982. Well, we're still funding that, and we'll probably continue to fund that. So if churches pull out without putting something into that, that will cause harm to pastors retiring who were pre-82. Okay? So that's part of that financial package. And each conference has a little different twist to that. Wendy?
So is that why a
microphone.
decision should? Oh, so is that why a decision should be made before September to get this good deal if you want to leave? And that is why the Global Methodist Church deemed to split, so that they got a good deal going out, because it's very likely that come in September, all of this will change and the deal won't be as good, because if it stays in place, it will be so expensive to the Methodist Church that they won't survive, because all they will have in them is the progressives, not the traditionalists. Mm-hmm. And so it's vital to decide before September what this church is going to do, whether it wants to stay progressive or whether it wants to go traditionalist and split.
Uh-huh. Give me one moment. I have my crystal ball over here that will tell me the future of what our church is going to do. Just kidding.
Excuse me, that isn't to say what it will do. It's just if it goes that way, it could choose to be progressive. I'm not saying that it's going to choose, but if it wants to choose to be traditionalist, it needs to make up its mind before September.
Yes. Again, we can't really tell what the General Conference of 2024 is going to do. However, a lot of work has gone. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not very business oriented. With I can take care of my own budget and stuff. But when it comes to the church and all of the budgets and stuff, we know what it's like to put our own church budget together. So the general church has CF&A, Council on Administration, Church Administration, which takes care of funding for the entire denomination. And they have worked to put together this plan for exiting churches. So they have put together a formula so if a church wants to exit, you can pay this amount of money, which will take care of your obligation for that pre-82 and all the other obligations you have to the church. So they have a formula that's put together that will give an exact dollar amount that you can pay to keep those obligations, okay? I don't think that's going to change because that obligation, they're doing the best they can to look into their crystal ball to see what will it take to fund that 80 years from now. So they're saying if your church, based on what you have, based on your membership, based on your size, if you give this amount, this will help pay years down the road. I don't think that's going to change. The market may change, it'll crash. And if that happens, I don't think it's going to help any of us. I think we're all going to be in trouble. But for now, I don't see where that will make a big change. The other side to your question, Wendy, about theology, whether we'll be progressive or traditional. Right now, I know that we are traditional. That's our discipline. And we will hold to that discipline. Some are challenging it, and some are going ahead and not following it. But our leadership has to follow that discipline. If we don't, then we're not a church, and we just throw in the towel.
You please address the September issue as well. There is not a deadline of September.
Yes. The theology part, we're going to make that decision anyway. And some folks already have. We've already had folks leaving the church because they don't like where they think the church is going. But right now, and these are traditionalists, and my question to them is, but your church is traditional. Well, we don't like what it might be 2 years from now. I don't like what it might be 2 years from now either, but I'm not 2 years from now. I'm today, and I have an opportunity to do ministry today, and so let's do that because it is good right now, right? I mean, most all of you folks coming are happy.
But if traditionalistic churches are leading, and there is, if you only have to look online to see that a large majority, well, at least 1,000 different churches, and big churches at that, have decided to leave because they don't know what's going to happen. And they're seeking to start afresh, if you like. Because if all the delegates that are left are progressive, the church has to go in a progressive way. And that's not just LGBT, it's abortion rights as well that are a big problem to traditionalists. Mm-hmm. You can't just put it off and say, we could get a worse deal than if we were to say that we'd leave now because we're traditionalist. The deal at the moment is pretty good. You get to keep your church. They can change that and say, no, you don't get your church's house, which it is.
Yeah, we've said...
I mean, looking in a crystal ball, you can actually see what's happening. And we seem to be... Yeah,
some people believe they can, but a crystal ball is a crystal ball. it's 50-50. You may or
But
you may
you don't
not.
just, you think about what can be and what's happening. You can't just pretend it's not happening and put your head in the sand.
I agree. You can't pretend that it's not happening, but I also, for me, each one of us are different. But for me, I'm the type of person that likes to be prepared when it happens, and not knowing what's going to happen, I'm going to wait to be best prepared when it happens. If it doesn't go my way, I can make that decision then. If 2024 says, you know, pastors, you're going to have to be liberal and traditional, and I'm like, that's going to split me in half. I don't know that I can do that. I'll have to make that decision then. Churches will, and yes, some churches are making that decision now. For me, I'm not going to make that decision until the time comes when I have to make that decision. I have time. I'm doing ministry that I enjoy doing. I'm working with a church that enjoys doing the ministry. We're doing a lot of good things. For me, I'm not going to put that into jeopardy by saying we need to split, or that I'm going to leave because you guys are too progressive or too traditional or whatever. So I'm going to wait for that. Hang on just a minute, Dan. We'll get there. I need to answer the question about September. So part of that protocol, but part also of the paragraph in the discipline, the General Conference of 2019 did set a deadline of December 2023. So the disaffiliation is good until December of 2023. Now, annual conferences are having to call special annual conferences in order for those churches to disaffiliate. So if your church wishes to disaffiliate, there is a process that we'll also get to. But if you wish to disaffiliate, the first of those is October, the end of October. The Virginia Annual Conference will have a called annual conference to approve those churches wishing to disaffiliate. You have to have that information has to be in before that annual conference meets. So the deadline for that is September. So if you wish to disaffiliate in October, you have to have all that work done. You have to have all the financial package, everything done by the deadline of September, okay? There will be other deadlines as well until 2023, December, okay? So let's let Dan ask a question. Dan's.
I have 3 short questions. And let me see if I've got this straight. The traditional church is being besieged by the progressives. And who is being invited or forced to disaffiliate? The traditionalists or the progressives?
Okay.
The language.
Is that all 3 questions
no,
there, Dan?
that's
or
one. That's the first one.
All right,
Who is it?
Let's look at the first
Who's
one.
invited to disaffiliate?
So the first one is, I think part of that, Dan, is a personal. If you think our church is being attacked, that's a personal feeling or personal belief. As an attack, I don't see our denomination being attacked from either side.
The fact that it's having to split doesn't mean it's being attacked?
Yes. Right now, both sides are leaving. Progressives are leaving. Traditionalists are leaving because, again, they're trying to look into their crystal ball and see, well, which way is the conference going to go in 2024? The progressives believe that there's still a chance that in 2024 the church will remain traditional. So they're pulling out. The traditionalists believe that in 2024 the church is going to go progressive and liberal, and so they're pulling out.
Okay,
so,
but wait, excuse me one second.
Mm-hmm.
When you started this, you talked about disaffiliation. So when the big church, the Methodist Church, says disaffiliation, who are they talking about disaffiliating?
They're talking about any congregation who wishes to leave the denomination, who can't stay part of our denomination anymore. They can withdraw.
So where will they be? Where will the
We're-
big church be? Will they be progressive or will they be traditionalist?
We will not know that until 2024.
Does the agreement to disaffiliate include a requirement that the progressives will not thereafter attack or come after and say, we want to be a part of the people with stars, the traditionalists? We want to be a part of that church as well. Not only our disaffiliated church, but also a part of that traditionalist church. We want to be both. What's to prevent them from doing that?
Once you disaffiliate, you will no longer be part of the United Methodist Church.
I understand. That's
You're-
fine.
you're
But,
out.
but they've done, now they will have done it once. They will have come in and said, we want to be a part of the Methodist Church, and we want to be recognized for that. And so the Methodist Church says, well, you can be the progressive Methodist Church. Now, what's to prevent them from saying, we don't like being part of the progressive Methodist Church. It doesn't satisfy our needs. We want to be part of the traditionalist Methodist Church. Let us in again.
Yes. Yeah, that's a possibility. Churches who disaffiliate can come back into the United Methodist Church, but you have to understand that once the General Conference makes that ruling, just like it has now, you have to follow that book of discipline, which the book of discipline 2019 General Conference says, if we want to look at the traditionalists, we will not ordain gays, we will not accept same-sex marriages as recognizable by the church. We will not do those things. That is our current discipline. So whatever the General Conference does in 2024, whoever remains, whoever comes, whoever leaves, if you remain part of the United Methodist Church, you will have to abide by that discipline. So in 2024, they may decide to go progressive. They may take out all the language on sexuality. They may say, we're going to ordain same-sex marriages, we're going to ordain clergy, same-sex clergy, we're going to do all of those things. They may say that. Those churches who remain have to abide by that discipline.
May I ask you, so my third question then is, if the decision is made, is the decision made by the national church or is it made by the individual church? That's half the question. And the other half of the question is, where are we?
The decision is going to be made by the General Conference for the entire denomination, worldwide, United Methodist Church, worldwide.
Okay.
So, which is somewhat complicated too, because you have churches, for example, the United Methodist Church in Africa. It is illegal for the United Methodist Church in Africa to accept gays and same-sex marriage. You can be put to death, which has also created a lot of discussion in the United States. So if the United Methodist Church goes liberal and says we're going to accept all this, then we can anticipate that all the churches in Africa are going to withdraw, or they're going to stay United Methodist and be forced into persecution.
Have we made a decision in this church?
No.
And do we have an opportunity to make the decision, or is the General Conference going to make the decision for us?
No. The each individual church has the opportunity, just like each individual member. Again, we've already had members who are leaving over this issue. And they come and they say, you know, I just can't stay within a church that I think is going to be doing this. I'm going somewhere else. Some have joined Baptist churches, some have joined Brethren churches. They've not all gone to another Methodist church. Your church will have the opportunity when that time comes to vote. You can vote whether you're going to stay with the denomination, you're going to leave the denomination. You will have that opportunity. Every church does.
Let me be on the record that I am not in favor of death for any LGBTQ members for their faith.
Amen. Or any other way as well, because that's not who we are. But we will have the choice. We'll have the opportunity to vote. And Wendy has another question, and then we have a question up here.
On YouTube, there's a video, Why Are Traditionalists Leaving and Not Progressives, from the United Methodist Church by Daniel Hickson. It really, really explains what's happening in this.
And Wendy, I thank you for sending that video to me as well. And I did watch that video, and it was good, but there were some questions. And one of the questions you raised was the progressives, why are the traditionalists leaving and not progressives? That is not accurate because the progressives are leaving as well. They're both leaving. We just hear the numbers of the traditionalists who are leaving because that makes news. The progressives, even 2 years ago, we had huge numbers on both sides. Progressives in the northern states, traditionalists in the southern states, they were both pulling out. And if you read some of the Methodist things coming out, you'll see both sides are leaving. So it's not just traditionalists, it's progressives and liberals as well. And
I think my question was combined with Yukon and Dan. But Dan's, it's just heartbreaking. I'm heartbroken over the fact that there's got to be a choice made because of the division and because it creates hate. It does. It's hate. Our churches are hating. I'm sorry.
yeah, we do need the mic.
It's a question and a comment too. You know, it just breaks my heart that this is where we are. And, I guess my question now would be, do we have to make a choice? I know God calls us to make a choice. It's Scripture. But what about the churches that aren't doing anything, that will do nothing? Where will they end up? Will that choice be made for them?
Well, again, as you said, we're going to have to make a choice, either spoken or non-spoken. The spoken choice will be whether or not we call a church conference and decide we're going to stay within the denomination or leave the denomination. First, we need to see where the denomination is. Right now, the denomination is traditional. So if your church wishes not to be part of the traditional, then you force a vote of the church to call a church conference and vote that we don't want to be traditional anymore. We want to be progressive. And then in 2024, if the church denomination goes progressive, then you need to decide whether or not you're going to be separate from the Progressive United Methodist Church or rejoin the United Methodist Church as progressives. But if you do not take a vote either way, whichever way the conference, you've already taken a vote now to be traditional because you're following the discipline of the United Methodist Church. When that changes, and that is subject to change every 4 years we have general conference. Each general conference is not bound by the general conference before. So they can make changes every 4 years. Okay? So those of you who've been in the church forever, and you've been part of the denomination, it's like the pendulum on the clock. It swings. There have been times when the United Methodist Church was very liberal. Go back to the 1800s Civil War, the United Methodist Church was liberal. We were persecuted for that because we were against slavery. And churches, the way that you could tell, they put markers on the church that said, if your church, and I grew up in one of those churches, and the marker said, Methodist Episcopal Church South. Okay? You know what the South stood for? Slavery. So you marked your church that you believed in slavery. Others had the marking Methodist Episcopal Church. Nothing. And that meant that you were against slavery. Okay? There was a huge division in the church over slavery, and those churches divided. And that was part of that history. That pendulum has swung back now, and for a long time, we were traditional, and now we're swinging more to being more liberal. And I can promise you, without a doubt, because human nature, that's who we are, the pendulum will swing again. It's human nature. We will. And yes, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt with that, but it's part of who we are. Let's get Phyllis. We'll come to you in a minute, Debbie.
I just wondered about the Global Methodist Church. Is that sort of an informal status right now, or is that something that's
No,
established?
The question is asked about the Global Methodist Church, and the Global Methodist Church, they started May 1st of this year. The Global Methodist Church is a break off of the traditional Methodist in the United Methodist Church. So they're a break off of our denomination to form a new denomination. Some of the questions have been, do we have to be part of the Global Method? No, you do not. They're a new denomination that formed out of the United Methodist Church, and they started May 1st of this year.
I'm not and haven't been Methodist, so this question is just very basic. Who are our delegates that go to this conference and that represent this church, and how many do we have? How is that broken down? I'm sorry. If that
Yes, no, good question. Each church charge has one member to the annual conference and the pastor. So for every pastor, there is a lay person who is a member of the annual conference. And those are the ones who get to vote. Every year you have one. This past year, we did not have one. Our member to the annual conference was sick, had health issues, could not go. We asked, I think it was 3 or 4 different people after we found out, and those 3 or 4 declined to attend. So if your church declines to send somebody, then you do not have a representative. Those people, in turn, every 4 years, will vote for the members who will go to the general conference. Lay people vote for lay members, clergy vote for clergy members, and then we send the delegation. Tom Berlin, whom we will listen to here in a little bit, he is the lead member of the delegation to General Conference at present for 2024. If it's postponed, if it's a new General Conference, next year, 2023, we will have to vote for new members to go to the General Conference. Does that answer the question? Well, actually, you can't, Mike, because it doesn't pick up. Sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question. I think everybody knows that we're moving to Williamsburg, and we'd like to find a church in Williamsburg. Is there any way to determine whether that is a progressive or a conservative charge?
At this point, I do not know of any distinction, and I doubt if we'll ever have that distinction written out. Most people find out just by going.
Thank you.
And you can, I know when I first came here, I had a few people who came and specifically asked me that question. Are you progressive? Are you liberal? Are you conservative? And I will answer that question one-on-one, but I will not answer that question in a session like this or from the pulpit. Number one, as I've shared with you before, I will continue to share with you, I will preach the gospel to progressives, liberals, sinners, saints. I will preach to all people and will not make a distinction. Because once I do that, then I'm not a pastor of the gospel, I'm a pastor of the denomination or the church. So that's where I stand.
I have a chart that shows a comparison between the UMC as it is now with the Global Methodist Church, if anybody's interested in looking at the differences.
You have a chart that compares?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On everything.
Yes. And Wendy, I appreciate that. My difficulty with that is the Global United Methodist Church is a denomination that just started May 1st. to know what their values and what they stand for this early in the game, for me, is, again, like looking in the crystal ball. Because they won't be able to know those things until they become established. They have written their own discipline, so, and a lot of that they did take from the United Methodist Church, but, yeah, and if you're interested in that, Wendy's volunteering that information, if you'd like to have that. Thank you, Wendy. You are not trouble. You're asking some great questions that others have already asked, and we need to answer those.
It seems like we are doing a lot of guessing. We really don't know what they'll decide in 2024. We're guessing at probably on the negative side, but I'm not sure why we need to make a decision now if we don't really know what we're deciding for or against until the 2024. There'll be time after that to make a decision and to, if I know some people are worried about paying the 2 years of apportionments and so forth. And if your congregation does not have that money, they will sell the church building, and use that money.
Yeah, we'll answer
That's
that
not
question
right.
as well. Yeah, that's not accurate. You cannot sell
Not us.
assets, but any church cannot sell assets to pay the obligation to the
No,
conference.
that's not what I'm meaning. If everybody leaves the church physically, whatever is above you would sell the church, not the congregation or what do you call whatever is above us?
The annual conference?
I don't know. In order to recoup that money, not the people there, and then substitute it for the apportionment.
So I think what I heard first when you were asking the question, what I heard was selling assets to pay obligations.
No.
And you can't do that. The other part that I think I'm hearing now is if your church closes
Yes.
because of you didn't disaffiliate or all the members leave, which we have that happening every year as well. 6 churches this past year, 4 churches on the district this past year closed. And that property, again, all property belongs to the United Methodist Church.
Right.
Some people disagreed with that and still disagree with that. I think it's good, and the church thinks it's good, mainly because it prevents things exactly like this from happening. Because if the church did not own that property, the churches wishing to leave could just up and leave. Or if you had a group come into your leadership that was against what your church believed in, they could make the decision for you, which can't happen now because the conference will not allow that to happen. So that has been the safeguard for the denomination. Otherwise, anybody could come in and take over a Methodist church. And we see that happening in other denominations as well. I've known a number of Baptist churches where the leadership changed and then the church split because half the church didn't believe what the leadership believed and they left. So yes, when a church closes, that property then goes to the district. The district sells that property, and that money at this point stays within the district, and they use that for district missions.
Right. Well, I know that some people in another church, that's what's worrying them, like they're going to be held hostage until they pay up or something, and they feel like they can't do that, but the district can sell the church or whatever.
Yes, and churches feeling like they're being held hostage. The financial issue with that, so So let's say, this is hypothetical, okay? So those recording, notice I said hypothetical. I have no grounds as to this actually being true. But let's suppose that Maynard Church votes to disaffiliate. And the conference says, okay, you can disaffiliate, but you need to pay your apportionments for a year, or if you're in the middle of the year, the remainder of this year and a following year, and you will need to pay obligations of $100,000, okay? And you're like, man, $100,000, where are we going to get $100,000 from? Okay, so let's suppose that you wish not to pay the money, but you're going to leave as a congregation. So you leave. Where are you going? Are you going to meet at the community center? And then they're going to charge you rent. And where will you buy a church for less than your apportionments for a year and a half and $100,000? We have our church insured for over $1 million. So your assets, we believe, are worth over $1 million, and you're not going to pay $250,000 for it? I mean, if you want the church. So you can pay that. It would be better than buying a church if you had to buy one. So there's a lot that goes into that we have to think about. Last question, because then we have to get ready for worship for today.
I'm just as concerned as everybody else that showed up this morning, but I think we're forgetting one thing here. I think we need to pray about it. I think we need to be in fervent prayer about it and search our own hearts and support our pastor. And I think that God is not the author of fear, and he is the author of peace and grace. And I think that's where we need to put our trust.
Thank you. Well said. And next week we'll get into some of the, and if you have other questions, we'll deal with that. If we need to go 3 weeks, we'll go 3 weeks. But we'll get into the question answer from the conference Jeremiah team as well. But part of that process, I told you there's a process. We'll outline that in these classes as well. The first part of that process is you let your district superintendent know. And once you let your district superintendent know, he asks that the church be in prayer for 30 days. There's a 30-day prayer time before you have your church conference to make the decision. You're going to be in prayer for 30 days. That's part of the process. Thank you, Anna. What's the question? Once you decide, once you make the decision you want to disaffiliate.
But you're saying that in September, that we have to know by September, and so we can't make the decision without 30 days of prayer before the decision, and the decision has to be made by September?
Wendy's asking the question about the September deadline. And the October annual conference. Yes, you have to have that 30-day prayer time before the deadline of September. So there's no way that I don't think any church now can move to be in the October annual conference. So you'll have to wait until the next annual conference is scheduled, but you can schedule any time to be in that prayer time. But you have to have the... We haven't got enough time for the September. No, there's no way you can do 30 days prayer time and then the decisions that need to be made for October. All right, last one, Alan, then we'll...
I don't think I need this, but I can holler loud now.
Well, speak into it so the folks streaming.
The way I analyze this, that it seems to me like in 2 years, one group or the other going to be voted out, right?
One or the other, depending on which you decide. Or it could be that some churches, which I lean more towards what some of our other folks have said, if we're doing ministry, okay, why would you want to stop doing that? Whether you're progressive, liberal, traditional, whether your denomination is progressive, liberal, traditional. If your church, if Maynard Church is doing ministry, you love the people here, you love the congregation, you love the, why would you not want to do that? Why would you want to go somewhere else? Well, the denomination may not have a choice. They may say you're going to be progressive, and you live under those progressive rules, but at the same time, I think, me looking in the crystal ball, that they're going to allow us to be the church we need to be. So, am I getting into preaching time yet? We're getting close. So for me, I'm going to have to make that decision as well. So am I going to be liberal? Am I going to be traditional? I'm going to have to make that decision. Will the church denomination force me to be one or the other? They may. Will they allow me the freedom to be who I am? I believe, because that was part of the original protocol, was that you could be who you wanted to be, which means if I decided to do a traditional, they would appoint me to a traditional church. If I decided to be progressive, they would appoint me to a progressive church and would allow me to do that. That was part of the original package. I'm okay with that. Will they let the church do that? Will they let the church decide whether or not you're going to be or not? We'll see in 2024. But the church will need to decide which direction you're going to go.
I know for a fact that there are United Methodist churches in the United States who have accepted gays. I know of a gay bishop and a gay district superintendent. And how can they continue to be United Methodist if they're going against the discipline?
As we said earlier, there are churches who are defying the discipline. And for some of those churches, there are reprimands that will take place or are taking place. Some churches are getting away with it. Depends on your location. If you're in the Midwest where those districts are very liberal, then you can probably get away with it for a while because the bishop's not going to push the issue. Now, how that will happen in the future, I think they're waiting for 2024. All right, I'm going to have to close because sorry, Skip, we're at the end of our time. We've got about 8 minutes before worship begins, so let's close with prayer. Loving and holy God, we are not intelligent people. We like to think we are, but when it comes to you, you tend to teach us that when we think we know it, you teach us that we don't, and when we don't know it, you teach us that we do. And I guess in that way we are somewhat smart because we turn to you, but on our own we're not so intelligent. But with you we are extremely well off. So we turn ourselves over to you not only as individuals but also as a church, and not only as a church but also as a denomination. We pray for our denomination. We pray for our church. We pray for our people. But most of all, God, we pray for those who do not know either one, which is our mission, to reach out to those who do not know you. May that always be our goal. And may you always teach us how to do that best. And this we pray in the name of